Imagine if there's some people listening here who are kind of amateur level distance running. A lot of the time, it's just about finishing the marathon. But for those that have done a few marathons and they're starting to sort of look at um, PRs and trying to beat their previous best time, what's your advice for like pacing strategies, particularly in those really important periods of the run, like the middle miles and the final push? Do you use simply looking at your GPS unit? Like what monitor do you use, and do you look at say kilometers splits or over specific distances?
Yeah, I use a Coros GPS watch, which is just a yeah, similar to a Garmin, but just a different brand. And yeah, I don't like every K split. I just I can't do it. It
Yeah,
just
right.
mentally it just becomes a bit tiresome. So I do, yeah, like I said, like to do those 5K splits and just have a setting set that'll give me a notification at 5K and tell me the time. But in saying that, I probably recommend going off the timing and the K markers that are on the course, because at the end of the day, they've been measured. GPSs, can be off at times, particularly over an extended distance like that. So for me, like knowing the split I need to hit for that 5K, and then going off the timing and the K markers they have on course, um, is always beneficial. In terms of pacing, I mean, one of the biggest mistakes, and I've definitely made it before, is trying to bank time in the marathon. It very, very rarely works. Trying to go out a bit quicker and get a few minutes under your belt in the first half will 9 times out of 10 bite you in the ass in the second half. And it changes the experience you have in the marathon depending on how you run it. And obviously, everyone would love to run a marathon where you're cruising for the first half. Gets a little bit tough towards the end, and pick it up. Everyone wants to run a negative split, and trying to run as even as possible across the two halves of the race is going to give you a far better experience
Yeah.
than blowing up at the end, which can get pretty hard.
Yeah. So you talked about the Gold Coast where you DNF. So you didn't finish that one due to gastrointestinal issues with your prep. And then you talked there about how there were times where you tried to bank time and go out a bit harder and faster with your initial splits. What are your biggest learnings or challenges that you've faced with marathon running? And what have you learned to overcome those that could potentially help some of the listeners as well with their own running endeavors?
I think the nutrition thing has been massive for me, and I think, as I said, it's just been a bit of a process of working out what works for me, and understanding that it isn't one size fits all, and that what works for someone else or an elite athlete that you might follow and might idolize might not work for you. I think that's been super beneficial. Um, the banking of time thing, and just I guess just running your own race. It's very easy to get, particularly in these big races with a lot of people. It's very easy to get caught up in um, you know racing other people, or trying to keep up with a different pace group. I think it's super important to run your own race. You've done all your own training, so why get to race day and try and run someone else's race? And it's obviously a lot easier said than done, but because there are so many other people out there. But if you can just, yeah, sort of stay in your own race, run your own pace, I think that's super beneficial.
So what are the biggest mistakes that a lot of beginners make in your experience that you see, and how can they correct those?
I think that the time goal thing has always interested me. It's obviously, 3 hours is a massive goal when you get a lot of groundswell of people trying to hit that sub 3 hours, and I think it can be a little bit to some people's detriment sometimes. Of it's obviously fantastic to have goals and have something to aim towards, but I think it does put a lot of undue pressure
Mm.
on you, and then all of a sudden you're running, you might run a 3:01, and then you're disappointed. It's like, well,
Yeah,
you just ran a 3-hour marathon, so things can't be too bad. But it does change the mindset you have, that all of a sudden you see that 3:01 as a failure, whereas if you were 60 seconds down the road, it'd be a great success. So I've always found that really interesting, and I would probably contradict myself a bit there, because I do, am trying to run times myself and all that sort of stuff. But it's, yeah, it's not a mistake from some people, but I think people can get too caught up in what the time means, and I think
yeah,
it's important to strip it back to the fact that you just ran a marathon,
yeah,
an hour and a half faster than what most people
yeah.
average would.
Kind of distracts you from enjoying the pursuit, which was what it was all about. I recently listened to a podcast with Lane Norton. I'm not sure if you know who Lane Norton is, but he's a PhD, and he's a powerlifter, involved in physique sports, and is involved with a lot of communications with a lot of these different publications around, bodybuilding and strength and so forth. Has a website, BioLane, very influential in the space. But he was talking on a podcast recently about this one gentleman who was a natural bodybuilder and had terrible genetics for competing natural bodybuilding, some of the worst genetics. And he managed to work his ass off to get to a point where he was at, say, the Natural World Championships, and ended up coming third, and was completely dejected. And he was talking about how, for a lot of people, they were so excited for him and heaped a lot of praise on him, and it was a remarkable achievement. But for him, he was really depressed. It said that, all I wanted was first, and to get this is like a disappointment, that kind of thing. And he says it's quite a miserable existence if you end up like that. I think that you really want to, as much as you want to continue to improve, you want to be able to enjoy the process, don't you? And that seems like something you're doing at the moment with your running, which is great.
Yeah, I think it's probably a realization I came to with that whole diminishing returns thing, is that I might not run any quicker over my next 5 or 6 marathons,
Yeah.
and that's an adjustment in your mindset, knowing that you got to put in the work, and you go and you might give it your best shot, but you might fall a little bit short, but still finding enjoyment in the process and in the race itself, regardless of the outcome, I think is really important.